Okay, ready? Here we go. Yesterday we
in the group. New people.
Okay.
In the group, it's the same people.
I'm sorry?
The group is the same old people, so we need new people to really encourage.
Bezrat Hashem. They're not old people. They're the same people. Every day is brand new. Every day is a brand new. Every person that comes is a brand new person. Every day that comes. Okay, here we go. Let's go. We learned the difference between Yaakov and Asav. And the difference between Yaakov and Asav is the difference between good and bad. And the difference between good and bad is the difference between the world the way God wants it and the world the way we want it. And ideally, it's supposed to be that we want it to be the way that God wants it. So in simple English, Asav is egotism and Yaakov is Judaism. Judaism is that the whole world is supposed to be the way that the Creator is creating it. God's creating the world, and the world is supposed to be healthy and happy, and every individual is supposed to express his individuality, and it's supposed to be a productive world, and it's supposed to be a world that's ready for big surprises from God, that wants big surprises, that wants to have success above anybody's imagination, happiness above any human comprehension. How do you say, fulfillment, and the world will be filled with honesty and trust and brotherhood and all these wonderful things that communism and all these religions talk about, and they certainly have not produced, that the world will be the way the Creator wants it. That's the whole thing. The world will be the way the Creator wants to be. That's what Yaakov wants. What does Asav want? Asav wants the world basically to be the way it is, but he just wants to rule it. He just wants to rule it. He wants as much as he possibly can. He doesn't really care about anybody who doesn't agree with him. That's the difference between tikkun and tohu. Generally speaking, in let's say a wedding, where there's two things in Judaism, basic things that Judaism is based on: wedding and divorce. Wedding and divorce. Wedding makes Judaism, makes the world, makes children. Divorce makes the opposite, separation. Everybody does it their own way. Of course, there are a lot of good reasons for divorce and a lot of bad reasons for divorce, but basically the reason for divorce is people can't get along together. They can't get along. They can't get along. The same thing as God wants. When God gave the Torah, he got married to the world. There's a unification of God and the world. But the fact is they say that marriage, that the how do you say, matches are made in heaven. Before a person is born, it's already determined who he's going to get married to. So to speak, the marriage is already there spiritually. Well, with God, it's something the same thing. God is creating the world all the time. So he's already married to the world in a certain way, but in a very external way. And the idea is we're supposed to reveal the internal connection between God and the world, that God isn't just some religious figure. God is also a religious figure, but the God is not left to that. You don't think that God is some big spirit sitting up in heavens or something, because that brings to idolatry. That brings to divorce. That brings to a husband cheating on his wife, or a wife cheating on her husband. We're the wife, I guess, and God is the husband. So there's no unity with her husband, so she goes and cheats with other. He goes and cheats, she goes and cheats, whatever. The ideal is supposed to be called marriage, and marriage means a unification of all opposites. That was Yaakov and Asav. Yaakov desired that Asav should unite with him. They were brothers. They were twin brothers, even though that their natures were totally different. But that's the way God made the world. That's what God wants. God wants a world that everybody's nature is different. Everyone's nature is different. Every human being is different from every other human being. Everyone. But on the other hand, every human being is the same. How are they different? They're different from their personalities. How are they same? They're the same because they're all alive. They're all creations of God. So ideally, both of these things are supposed to be united. That the differences between everyone, and when they're united together, then that makes harmony. That makes harmony. That's a marriage. A man is the opposite of a woman. And the natures are different. When they get married, that's harmony. That's a wonderful thing. But there has to be something higher than both of them that joins them together. If they join each other for just personal advantages, that's then Asav won. Asav's whole thing is I do everything, whatever benefits me. Whatever I like, that's what I do. Whatever I don't like, that's what I don't do. There has to be something above them that says, well, okay, but there's things I like, things I don't like. But it could be that I like the wrong things and I don't like things that I should like. Could be. And that's the thing that joins them together in a wedding. There has to be a third thing that joins them. In a Jewish wedding, there's what's called a wedding canopy. And that represents a higher power that unites the man and the woman, the husband and wife. And that's the reason why they don't cheat on each other and why they're loyal to each other no matter what. And because there's a higher power that united them. They're together because God wants them to be together. That's called the sanctity of marriage. But here's the same thing. Yaakov wanted to bring the sanctity of marriage. He wanted to bring a higher power that would unite egotism and godliness, Judaism. That's a little bit not right what I said, Judaism, because the idea of Judaism is to do this uniting. So godliness and egotism, to unite them together. That everybody should feel that they're being created. They should put God first, but on the other hand, everybody's individual. And you have to use your individuality the way that God wants. So in other words, thinking about God first. That's Yaakov's thing. And Asav's thing is thinking about me first. And maybe thinking about God, maybe not. We see that Asav thought about God. Asav wanted the blessings. The question is, what's more important, right? I decide what I want to do, and then I figure out ways to prove that God is agreeing with me. Or do I do what God wants? That's what the Torah says. But then afterwards, I use it in my individual way. I express. So that's what he says, that Yaakov, he wanted to unite with Asav. But Ba'avodazav, Yaakov and Asav, in order that Yaakov wanted to unite with Asav. He wanted Asav to turn his attention to the Creator. Shahaya Yaakov, the Yaakov, he had to draw down to Asav this. What am I doing? Wrong, press the wrong button. He wanted to draw down to Asav this makif, this surrounding level. Like I said, the wedding canopy, the awareness that God is creating everything and that God is the boss of everything. Of tohu, shehu b'chinas, or this is the light of what's called tohu, shebeligable, which is unlimited. Lokach, therefore, hutzrich la'alot man. Yaakov had to do something. In a Jewish wedding, the canopy is already done. People bring the canopy, but Yaakov over here, he had to bring the wedding canopy himself. He had to do the whole business. It's like getting married to a woman that doesn't want to get married, to you, right? Somehow or other tricking her to come into the, wedding canopy, come to, this such and such a place for $1 million prize. You won. She comes, but you have to wear white clothes. And if you want, bring a veil and everything. What's that got to do with $1 million? You'll see. Comes to the wedding, all of a sudden he brings a wedding canopy and he says, "You are now my wife." What are you doing? What's going on over here? That's what Yaakov wanted to do with Asav. He wanted to make a unification. A marriage, of course, is only between a man and a woman. So that's where my whole metaphor falls away. But Asav represents the world. Yaakov represents godliness. He wants to make a marriage between them that they work together. But Yaakov had to bring some force, some power that united them both together, godliness. How did he do this? That's what the Jewish people are doing now. You have to do work. In our case, we have to do Torah, commandments. Every time a Jew does what God wants, then that elicits a blessing from above. Every time that a Jew does what God wants him to do, and in some ways even more when a Jew refrains from doing what God prohibits, it draws down it arouses God. It makes God happy about the world. That's what's called the surrounding power. That's called the makif, the surrounding level of tohu. We said tohu, remember, it was before the world. So Yaakov had to raise up Mayan Nukvin. He had to raise up feminine waters. How did he raise up the feminine waters? There was no commandments back then. we saw that last week the sticks, you put these sticks in front of the sheep. That is something like putting on tefillin today. But he didn't have any commandments back then. So Our job is the same thing as what Yaakov did, that by means of our commandments, we draw down this surrounding level, this, so to speak, wedding canopy that unites God with the world, that the world will be part of this marriage. Everything will be good. Well, Yaakov, he began this whole process, and he had to, by elevating this feminine waters, in other words, raising up physical energy to God, is tzorech liot lefi ofen, so it has to be according to the way that he wants to draw down. So Yaakov wants to draw down a special light of godliness that unites him with Asav, and Asav represents evil, bad, selfishness. Shelefi ofen hala, that because according to what you raise up to God, that's what God sends back down to the world. God reacts to what we do. That's called a bracha. That's called a bracha, a blessing. Blessings are God's reaction to what we do in the world. Blessings. Sometimes God gives blessings on his own, but then people don't want to receive it. Like we saw it tragically at Mount Sinai. God gave this big blessing. He revealed himself, and everybody 40 days later worshiped the golden calf. So it's we make the arousal from below is arousal from above. That's this hamshacha. Since it's so, since the tohu hoyarak base kavim, because we just finished saying that the difference between tohu and tikkun, the difference between Asav and Yaakov, that Yaakov was harmony and Asav was dissonance. Yaakov was three pillars, three pillars, right, left, and the middle, like the judge in the between, that decides between them. Truth, which decides between them. It says Titan Emes Yaakov. Yaakov was three pillars, but Asav was only two, right or left, right, good or bad. No harmony between them. Like an animal. Lokach, therefore, Hutzrach Yaakov had needed Lasot Atzmo, to make himself also Bedugmazu, similar to this. So Asav was like an animal. What's an animal? An animal is the things he likes, the things he doesn't like. Right, according to psychiatry, Freud and all these people, that's what a person is. A person is just based on pleasure and pain principle. That's it. People are basically animals, a little more complicated. But that's not so, that's a lie. That's a lie. The whole thing of that's tohu, that's Asav. That's man, if you want to call it, as he is. Yaakov is man as he should be. Namely, three pillars. A person can sometimes do what he doesn't like, force himself to do what he doesn't like, because it's the right thing to do. Right? He lives with a woman that he doesn't get along with, she makes him trouble, because that's what God wants. God doesn't want divorce. And there's benefits to it, the kids and etc. But there's a higher power that unites them both. That's what it used to be. People used to value marriage, they used to value family. That's called tikkun, fixing up the world. Asav, on the other hand, is what I like and what I don't like. There's nothing in between. I do what I like and I avoid what I don't like. That's Asav. That's being in the world. I want to increase the things I like, and the things I don't like, I want to eradicate, get rid of. That's Asav. And Yaakov wants to put order. That's how the world is. Those people are right. The Freud and all those guys, they were right. If there's no meaning in the world, then people are like animals. The people are like animals. So that Yaakov's whole thing is, I want Asav to also be harmonious like me. But how does he do it? He has to draw down in a blessing according to Asav. It's something like, nowadays, if you want to convince a person, let's say, that he should change his way of living, right? Let's say there's a person who's a thief, and you have to convince him that he has to stop being a thief. So how are you going to convince him? So you talk about, philosophy or religion or something. Doesn't mean anything to him. He'll agree with everything you say. He'll still be a thief. You have to talk to him in a language that a thief understands. Right? What do you want? You want money. You want pleasure. You want power. You want this. Well, I'll tell you a story about the Nebuchadnezzar, that he had all the power in the world and all the pleasures in the world, and he lost because he didn't believe in God. I don't know how you do it, but nevertheless, it has to be in the language that he understands. Same thing with Yaakov. Yaakov wanted to draw down a blessing to Asav. It had to be in a way that Asav could receive. So that's what it says. Therefore, Yaakov had to do certain things that would arouse these blessings from above. So Yaakov he divided his people into shtei machanot. He divided he had his wives, his children, the animals. So he divided them into two camps. Dugmas olam tohu, to be similar to the world of tohu. But now he was doing it. Shelasham, that there, haya zeh tachat zeh, that all the sphirot, all the aspects of God are one under the other. In other words, there's either right or left. But lo b'tziru gimel kavim, there's not in the way of three pillars, like we said before. By means of this, Yitkasher Yaakov would attach himself, he would arouse this world of tohu, and he would draw it down, or Makif would draw down this wedding canopy. He would draw down this surrounding light, and Asav suddenly would feel different. He would feel different. The world is not so threatening to him, right? The world is not so terrible. Yaakov is not his enemy anymore. God is not so bad. God is, on the other hand, the world is not so good, right? Asav would say, "Wow, I did all these pleasures. What have I gotten out of it? The whole business." And Yaakov is, after all, he's my brother. He believes in God. Maybe God really is the boss. He's keeping me alive. Asav would suddenly start, all of a sudden, from nowhere, change his mind. For this reason, Yuvan, now we can understand why the Yaakov, when he sent the animals to Asav, that was like a sacrifice, we said, as Hamincha Izim Matayim. He gave living animals. He gave him 200 goats. She'inyan Minchazu, this is Halas Man, this is elevating this feminine waters to draw down the surrounding level we talked about before. But who al derech inyan korbanos, this is something like sacrifices. Here, Yaakov didn't sacrifice them on an altar. He sent them to Asav, but it was the same idea. Sheim Allah's man, this is an elevation of feminine waters, to draw down the surrounding level we said before. But who al derech, this is something like the sacrifices. This is also drawing down on the same sentence. The elevating mind, nukvin, feminine waters, to draw down God's blessing. That's called masculine waters, mayan duchrin. This is Aramaic. Kanoda, like it's known. Nevertheless, even though they were supposed to be like sacrifices, but what he sent was not in any way like the sacrifices we did after the Torah was given. In the Torah. Because Shemaisa Korbanos, the doing of the Korbanos, whom Mi Behemoth Tahoras was from what called clean animals, shchutim davka, slaughtered animals. Like when they went into the ark, right? Noah's ark, Noah's flood was like 400, something like that, 400 years, 500 years before Yaakov. But when the animals went into the ark, to the teva, as they went in 2 by 2, those are the not clean animals. All the animals that were not permissible to eat. They went into the ark. All the animals that weren't fit for sacrifices. You couldn't make sacrifices out of them. It says all the behemot tahorot, sacrifices. So even by the time the animals that were fit for the sacrifices, the cows and the sheep and this, I don't know what about, actually I just thought about this. What about chickens and things like that? Chickens are not offered in the old. Anyway, it says all the pure animals, the clean animals, they went 7 by 7. So in other words, it was already known to mankind what the clean animals, at least it was known to the animals, 7 to 7, and there was known what was clean animals and unclean animals. So it says that Yaakov, now he was offering up animals to, so to speak, he was offering up animals in order to bring Asav closer. So he had to offering up animals that Asav understood. So he offered up animals not according to the laws of the Torah. According to the Torah, it has to be animals that are what's called clean animals, pure animals, permissible animals, and shchutim, animals that were slaughtered. You have to kill the animal. You can't offer any living animals in the Torah, except there's one exception on Yom Kippur. We'll see. But it's true that any Jew can slaughter his sacrifice. The sacrifice, but it has to be slaughtered. Lo matziru korban b'Torah b'chai. We don't find any living animal that's sacrificed to God except the seir lazazel, except for the goat that was pushed off the mountain on Yom Kippur. That was offered, so to speak, a living offering. even though in the end I had to die also. Also, the korbanos, also in the sacrifices, they would only sacrifice only parts of the sacrifice, not the whole sacrifice, only parts of the sacrifice. The mincha zos, and this offering that Yaakov sent to Asav, it was impure animals, also camels. Like it says, he sent camels. Begam, and also Shehem, they were Chaim, alive, below shchutim, and they weren't slaughtered. Excuse me. This is to appease Asav. This is because the halat man, raising up feminine waters, which is the sacrifice of Yaakov to Asav, he drew down what's called masculine waters of the surrounding level of Tohu. Now, this is something like nowadays when we work in a job, right? A Jewish person is supposed to be a holy person. It's a holy nation. It says, I'm Kadosh, we're a holy nation. So we're supposed to do holy things. What are the holy things? You do the commandments and everything. What about working in your job? What about a house? Of course you, but of course, that's something like what Yaakov did with Asav. He dealt with things that were not kosher as such, but he did it in a kosher way. But he did it in a kosher way. He didn't dealt with the mundane world, the physical world, but he did it with his intention was exactly what God wanted. In order, that's man and man of the world. That's what's called the elevating of the physical, the world, the feminine waters and the masculine waters of the world of Tohu, who Meshuna is different than the man and the mad of the world of Tikkun. And it was after this, for instance, after the Holy Temple was instituted, after the temple, so it was forbidden to make sacrifices outside of the temple. But before that, there were periods when it was permissible to make sacrifices in your backyard, certain sacrifices. So that was much more restricted. And even then, after the Jews received the Torah, there was no such thing as making offerings from a camel or from a dog or a chicken or whatever. You couldn't do it. There were very, very strict laws. That's what's called the world of tikkun. This is the idea of the sacrifices in the Torah. Because the Torah is the world of fixing up, of Atzilut. So the Torah comes to fix up the world, but it's very, very limited, the Torah. And it's only for the Jews. The non-Jews in the Torah, they have what's called 7 Noahide commandments, and there's nowhere near as many restrictions. There are certain restrictions. I mean, all the seven Noahide commandments are restrictions. But there's not any near as many restrictions as usually. They can eat whatever they want to. It just has to be slaughtered. They can marry anyone that they want to. It just has to be a woman and a man. They can't marry their family, can't marry their mother. There are certain restrictions, but nowhere near as much as the Jews. A Kohen can't marry a divorced woman. If a Kohen is married to a lady and he divorces her, he can't remarry her. What sense is there in that? That's Judaism. Judaism has certain laws, that these laws are doing what God wants. That's what God wants. Some of them are totally against our nature, but we do. But nevertheless, it has to be according to what the laws are. And the 7 Noahide commandments, that's more like in the world of Tohu. Even though you do it according to what the Torah says, but it's not anywhere near as limited. The world, what's called tikkun, fixing up. It's what's called an inside light of God. It's a light of God which is fit to every detail of the world. That the lights of God are contracted and articulated in the vessel. Because this light of God can be in a vessel. This is a teaching that has already been contracted the light, but Tzimtzumim Rabim and many, many contractions, like we said before in Eitz Chaim, in the book of Eitz Chaim, Kabbalistic book, that in Tikkun, the lights are very few. So he said, again, harmony, it's like harmony. What we talked about before. harmony. You want to have a harmonious band, even playing jazz or things like that, which are much less limited than it. But nevertheless, there are limitations. You have to play in the same key as everybody else, and they take turns playing. Everybody just doesn't play what they want to. And that's tikkun. Tikkun is everything is limited in order to make harmony. But if one person is playing, then it doesn't have to have any limitation, especially if he's not in front of an audience. Nobody's expecting anything. Then you can just do whatever you want. And if you're the boss, if you're the ruler, the king, then you can do anything you want to, and everybody thinks you're great. Everybody praises you, and that's called tohu. Tohu is no restrictions. So that's the world of tikkun is restrictions, but there's light, but it's restricted. It's harmonious. Therefore, the Torah is drawn down misham from the world. It's called the world of tikkun. Yigamken is also diktukim uvetzimtzumim. The Torah is very, very exact and very, very, detailed. And therefore, mafurish b'Torah. Therefore, in the Torah, it is explained, Seder Allah's man, how to worship, how to elevate energy to God. Of tikkun, akal b'diktukim, everything is exact. Shu mishpat ma'aseh karbonos. This is in the time of the temple, the sacrifices. She'ei behemoths toros. They had to be what's called permissible animals, and only for 3 types of permissible animals alone. There's a lot of animals that are permissible. For instance, deer, giraffes. Some people say giraffe is permissible. I don't know, but there's deer. And there's what's called mountain, whatever it is, antelopes or ibexes or whatever they are. And those things are permissible technically to eat. They're technically, but you can't bring them for a sacrifice in the temple. The animals have to be slaughtered. There's a lot of times when the sacrifice, according to the Torah, is disqualified. How and what? Diktukim. All these details, how to slaughter it, right? In slaughtering, there's a lot of details. In shchita, tremendous level of details. You have a number of details you have to understand. And what animal, sometimes there's things that make an animal unfit. If it has a hole in the lungs, a hole in the stomach, a hole in the food pipe, right? If it has a hole in the windpipe, it's not so bad, only if it's a certain size. All these different laws that there are, that's the whole essence of the Torah. On one hand, you can say that's ridiculous, but on the other hand, look at the human body. The human body is so tremendously intricate. And if there's one little tiny thing wrong, like one little corpuscle in your finger doesn't work, it could mess up your whole body. One tiny little pin in the bottom of your foot or something in the little cut in the bottom of your heel, it could render a person immobile, right? It gets infected. Who knows what happens? So the human body, and if you want things to work and you want things to be exact, it has to be very complicated. That's the way things go, right? There's also the details, how the car, how the engine works with all the principles of energy and propulsion and what they're called, the contractions and things like pressure, and this is very complicated, right? The science gets into it. It's very, very complicated, because if you want things to work, you want to know how things work, that's the way it is. You don't care about how things work, so you don't have to be complicated at all, right? No complication whatsoever. You just get a club, a bunch of gums, whatever the most modern weapon is, and you teach people, you go and kill people, and then you can kill all the scientists, you can kill everybody, and then you're the ruler. That's all. You don't need like they once, Henry Ford was a big anti-Semite. He was an anti-Semite, and they sued him. He used to have this paper called the Dearborn Press, and he was and so a Jew sued him, but they took him to court, and he claimed that he was ignorant. He didn't know. He just didn't know any better, which was the fact. He was ignorant. Anyway, that's what he claimed. So the point is that they asked him some questions, and they said, what is this? It's X, Y. He said, what do I have to know all those things about history and mathematics and physics? What do I have to know all that for? He says, I have money. I hire those people. If you have power, so you hire everybody. That's called tohu. Tohu means you don't have to have any order. You don't have to have any knowledge. Nothing is complicated. You have money. How do they say the golden rule? Whoever has the gold rules. That's the golden rule. That's called tohu. Tohu means simple world, no problems. The things go the way I want to, or they don't go the way I want to. That's tohu. Either you're for me or you're against me. Yaakov, he had to read in the time of the temple, things were very, very exact. But now Yaakov was dealing with Asav. This is an unusual task. And Yaakov wants to convince Asav, not just to overpower him. He wants to convince him. In order to do this, God has to come into the picture. God has to do something. God has to inspire Asav. Yaakov can't do it on his own. But in order to bring God into the picture, as Yaakov had to do all the work to arouse godliness, this masculine waters to come down. How did he do that? By the feminine waters, what he did in order to come up, he wanted to raise up the source of Asav, which was very tremendously high, called Tohu. This is a tremendously high light in a way of Ein Sof. Therefore, lo yochal kelim lachilo. Therefore, it was such a tremendous light that it couldn't be in normal vessels of the Torah. So therefore, he had to, and therefore he had to send the mincha, which was raising up his feminine waters to there. So therefore, he could use also gmalim. He could also send up to Asav camels and not slaughtered animals, whole animals. But kulam yochayim, and they were all alive and they weren't slaughtered. Why? It's not according to the Torah. How could he evoke any blessings from that kiliot or babechinas ein sof? Because this light from Tohu is what's called unlimited. And therefore, ein shom tzimtzumim. There's no limits. V'tikdukim. Ki, because ein sof baruch hu kol yochol is all able. Dizbola kol, and God is able to encompass everything, even bad. Av tameim, even impure animals. V'shiyuchayim, and the animals were still alive. She'ein nimsa sham dikdukim, without any details. If God would be detailed, so there wouldn't be any. Basically, the world would be like the angels, right? The angels, everything is good. They're all praising God. They're all singing praises to the Lord. And that's not what God wants. God wants a world with this free choice. In order to have free choice, you have to have what to choose. That becomes very, 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 very complicated. That's the world of order, of tikkun. That's the world according to the Torah. But Yaakov wanted to appeal to Asav, so he couldn't go according to the laws of the Torah as such. This was an emergency case, like first aid, right? There's the brain surgeon and the person who is the medic, first aid. So brain surgeon knows all the details with all the nerves and everything. The medic doesn't know all those things, just knows in general where the brain is, and etc. Yaakov had to do first aid. He had to save Asav. Kumam result, like it says, by chazir. It says that in the chazir, the pig, pork, it's called a chazir because atid lachzor, it's going to come back and be pure. Hainu lasid lava, that's only in the future. Sheyuvlo mobas lanetzach, when all bad will be removed from the world, even death will be removed from the world. Then there will be revealed atzmos ein sof, the essence of God. V'yochol gam chazir, and then pork, pigs, will be able to be elevated, which is not the case now. Why people would want to eat pork, I have no idea, but I guess it's just to show that even the worst things will be permissible. And therefore, Yaakov that sent a mincha Asav. So Yaakov sent these impure animals to Asav because he was appealing to the source. We can't do that though. Shehu Allah's man, this is elevating waters. Like I said, I don't know if you're supposed to even allowed to even mention his name, but there was a person in the history of Judaism that he knew all this things, and he decided that that's what he was going to do. He was going to do sins. He was going to do sins. He would do things against the Torah, but he would do it for the sake of God. He would make a blessing on it. So he'd make a big meal of pork or whatever on Yom Kippur or something, and he would eat, but he would make a blessing beforehand because he was elevating things up to the world of Tohu. Which, I mean, you can maybe you can say that somehow or other his intentions were good, which I doubt very greatly, and so does everybody else. But the fact of the matter is that you can't do that. You can't do that. Yaakov did it, first of all, because it was before the Torah was given. And Yaakov did it because he was dealing directly with Asav, and he knew that was the only way that he could elevate him. He knew. So therefore, he elevated the man to this level of makif of Torah, and he did specific things. He didn't go and eat impure foods or something. There were certain specific ways that he did. He just sent camels to Asav. That was in the place of like a sacrifice. So therefore, he raised up this to this man to this level of makif of Torah, that this is like infinite light of God. As Shalach Gamken, therefore he was able to send also impure things. Lokach, therefore Shalach, therefore he could also send camels, etc. Shorsham, the source of a camel, impure, this is very, very high. Like it says in Elazar, Eved Avram, that he also took 10 camels from the camels of Abraham. The call to Varanov and all the good things that Abraham had in his hand. Like it says in Psalms. In Psalms, it says like a child is weaned from his mother, but the word is gamul means to be weaned. Also, is the word for camel, gamul. So he was able to transform bad into good, certain bad things. Yaakov, and he couldn't. Only Yaakov was able to do this before Matan Torah, before God. Only Yaakov could do these things. Don't think that you could do it on your own. And don't the but we nitan lanu a Torah. We already have the Torah, and the Torah is a way of tikkun. So you can't do this anymore. Umashu tamei ba'asar, what is according forbidden and impure according to the Torah, he keeps away from. So he can't elevate it at all. Like it says, that soul will be cut off, etc. So it says that Yaakov is on the way to Asav, and he sends to Asav. Now we know what the goal was. We know what Yaakov's goal was. Yaakov's goal was to bring Asav to his senses, and that Asav would use his power to serve God, his power of individuality, uniqueness, to serve the Creator. Okay, so this is after Yaakov had this dream, and after Yaakov sends the messengers to Asav, and Asav, the messengers come back and they say that Asav is coming with 400 men, and Yaakov sends these. He tells these messengers, go back and give this big gift to Asav. Give this, and that's what he said. That's a sacrifice, and that says that Yaakov, that he woke up on that night, and he took his 2 wives and the 2 handmaids, but Yavor Yabak. He said he went over this river called Yabak. But he took them over the Nachal, and then he said he forgot something. Yaakov forgot, and he went back across the river, and that's when he fought with the angel. So Yaakov went over this river, which was called Mavar Yabok, a river or a passage, whatever. It's called Yabak. What do we care about that? So everything in the Torah, of course, is written by God. So he says, Yabak, this river that he went over, this passage that he went over, this is Yud Beit Kuf. This is Yichud, Bracha, and Kedusha. This is what's called unity, blessing, and holiness. Yabak. Unity, blessing, and holiness. You want to meet up with Asav, you want to meet up with the world, you want to deal with the world the way God wants you to have a positive effect on the world, to elevate the world around you, then you have to have these unity, blessing, and holiness. What are these? What does this mean? Hine Kesiv, it says, Be'ever anar yeshvu avotechem. Me'olam. It says, on the other side of the river, your forefathers dwelled. On the other, that's why Abraham was called Ivri. Now, the word Hebrew nation, means the other side. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they come from the other side. They're like from the other side of the world. The world is against them. They're against the world. Why is the world against them? Because they're the first Jews. They came from the other side of the river. What's the other side of the river? What does it mean? Hanar, this river, this is the river of understanding. The Jews come from above understanding. Like it says, Nar Yotzei Eden, like it says in the beginning of creation, that there's a river that came out from Eden and it watered the garden. The Shlosh Avot and the three fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they are Me'ever Anar. They're on the other side of the river. It says, Me'ever Anar, on the other side of the river, our fathers dwell. Hainu Bechinas Keter. That's this level of Keter. So you want to know why it is that Jewish people are hated? Jewish people are hated because they're above understanding. Nobody knows what it is. It's like men from Mars. But you get all these movies. There's the spaceships come from Mars. The first, I don't know how it is nowadays, but it used to be the what is it? The War of the Worlds. Remember the famous War of the Worlds? Who was it? They made it on the radio. That was only on the radio, and they made movies out of it. From what was his name? Anyway, very famous. Anyway, not important. So as soon as the strangers come from another planet, the first thing is they call out the army and they bomb them. They kill them. You can't understand them, so they bomb and they kill them. Right? There's no way to talking to these people. You got to draw first, shoot first, ask questions later. And that's what the Jews are. The Jews are like from another planet. What does it mean from another planet? Spiritually. They're from the other side of the river. What a Jew is, nobody knows. No one can understand what a Jew is. The Jews don't understand what a Jew is, but they know they're Jewish. I mean, I've told this story about 50 times, 50,000 times, I don't know how many times, but that's the reason I became religious. I went to a lecture of a big professor, and he said something bad about the Jews. And I had like zero Jewish identity. Nothing whatsoever. You know, my bar mitzvah, that was my graduation from Judaism. You don't go back anymore. I finished. No Jew. I didn't know whatsoever. I didn't know what Shabbos was, what Yom Kippur was, nothing whatsoever. I knew I was a Jew, but it was absolutely meaningless. Absolutely, totally meaningless. Less meaningless than, what color my eyes are or my size of my shoes. But a Jew is, you look in the mirror, you can see what color your eyes are. You go to a shoe store, it's important. What a Jew is no importance whatsoever. All of a sudden, this big professor made an anti-Semitic statement. Said something bad, the Jews are bad. I thought, wow, I thought that Jews were nothing. It's so important that he has to mention them and that he doesn't like them. It arouses their emotions. What's there about the Jews that he gets angry? What that he hates? And I investigated and I realized that it's a thing that you can't understand. Judaism is something that's just above understand. That's what Judaism is. That's what the Jews are. But it arouses everybody's ire. They're on the other side of the world. They're in the world. Jews are in the world. It's an identity the Jews don't shake and they don't want to shake. Right? Non-religious Jews, anti-religious Jews, whatever, they don't deny that they're Jews. The only ones that deny that they're Jews, and they've already stopped, are the Israelis. Because the Israelis, they wanted to substitute Zionism for Judaism. They wanted to do it, but it's not working. It didn't work. They're Jews. That because the Jews come from this level of Keter. This is above what's called the river of understanding. The Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they came from there. And they drew down below Me'ever Hasheni to the other side of the river. And that's what's called Zeran Pin of Atzilut, as we're going to talk about more tomorrow. What this has to do with Asav. Just one more line. Yaakov, that he wanted to draw down this level of makif, of tohu we talked about, which is above Atzilut. So he had, first of all, to go over this river and go back to his source, as we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow, and what this has to do with us. Let's do the Devar Malchut.